So next job, and this should be a bit of a fun one, is to modify and mount this pedal box. Got this bad boy off Alibaba at quite a reasonable price, but unfortunately it got a bit banged up during shipping. Not a big deal though, because the plan is to break it down both physically and emotionally and do a few mods and rebuild it, as there's a few shortfalls in the design, which I fully expected when I purchased it, and was always treating this as a bit of a kit or a starting point. Interestingly, I have seen a pedal box very similar to this being sold under a brand name. So the first design issue I want to address is this anemic little bracket for the brake pedal. Obviously the brake cops a massive beating and a huge amount of force goes through the pivots. So I want to update this or upgrade this with something a bit more substantial. And I'm thinking a machined component in there rather than the bent up plate. At least it does have a nice wide pivot point, which is a good start, but obviously, like I said, a huge amount of load goes through that pivot point. But also when you're heel towing, you end up putting quite a big side load on the brake pedal, so we want to make sure that pivot is rock solid. So rather than the welder, I think it's time to head over to the mill. So we've got our bit of stock set up in the milling vise. I've set the depth of the end mill with a bit of paper, and we want to square it up. So it's 25 by 25 square, and we want to take it down to 24 by 24. It's a 12mm carbide end mill, and my little table here says that I want to run that at around 100 feet per minute, and for a 1/2 inch end mill, sorry about the freedom units, but all these tables are in freedom units, I want to run it at about, what's that, about 700 RPM. The closest I can get to on my mill is about 600, so I'll set it up for that, which isn't crazy fast. So let's see if we can do some damage. Got the block clamped down and clocked it up. Oh, that's a horrible noise. And it's not too bad. So I think we can start cutting. No, we can't start cutting yet. I forgot to clock up. Time to drill the pivot hole. I've got the edge finder back in the mill, clock it up, center where we want the hole, and drill and ream it. I'm a little bit angry right now. I just dropped my brand new 12mm end mill and chipped 2 of the cutting faces. Okay, Pilot hole. Spot drill, I should say. Oh, a little bit of a flex issue here, I think. 1 second. Okay, things got a little bit crazy, but I think I've got a rigid setup now. Let's try to do a pilot drill, 6.5 mil. Okay, 7.8 mil drill for the reamer. Now for the reamer. The oil. And there is our part. Not too bad. A few tool marks because I'm a complete hack on the mill, but a very functional piece. Got some 8mm drill rod, which I will eventually cut down to size, and that's a great fit for our nice 8mm ream hole. The idea is obviously for the brake to pivot on that rod. All good. Also drilled and tapped a couple of M5 threads into the back to lock onto the rod. I'll probably mill a couple of flaps onto the rod just to positively locate it so it can't leap out at an inopportune moment. I do need to make up some replacement bushings for these horrible plastic ones. I did have these sort of pre-made bushings, but unfortunately the OD is too small for that bit of tube. But I needed to make up some washers, some end float washers anyway. I don't have any material for that, so they'll have to wait for another time. But I've got this bracket far enough where I can start putting it onto the actual pedal box. But first, a safety beer. Time to get back to something I know. Okay, let me get you caught up. We've got our brake pedal pivot. You've already seen that. I've also bent up this little channel section. The bottom of the brake pedal pivot is in tension, or this whole section is in tension when you apply force on the brake pedal, so that should brace all that very nicely. I then moved on to the accelerator pedal pivot. I was going to use the original one and just beef it up. Decided I didn't like it and machined up this bad boy. Started off in the lathe and eccentrically turned that little spigot on there. That is for the accelerator pedal return spring. It sits on there like that. That's what that shoulder on that bolt originally did on the original setup. That didn't all go to plan. As you know, I'm a complete hack on the mill, and as I was doing this final face here, the cutter came around, grabbed hold of the part, twisted it in the vise, and spun the head of the mill out of the way. I thought it was a lost cause, but I've managed to recover it, luckily, because it was a bit of work. The good news is that I don't have to worry about the chip I made in the on the cutting face of my end mill, because I've completely trashed the end mill now. Anyway, I think now we can finally move on to mounting it into the car. So, as we all know, there's not a whole lot of room in the Stratos, so this section of the pedal box has to go, and then using array of angle iron and flat bar, we will make up a mini bulkhead behind the sheet metal pedal box. So let me clean up all this and we can move on to the welder. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but one of the major design criteria for this pedal box, apart from actually being able to actuate the pedals, was to get the brake pedal as rigid as possible and remove as much compliance as possible. It is amazing how much force you can put through a brake pedal, and any compliance within the in the mechanism of the brake pedal itself just translates to, you know, poor pedal feel. So using just this folded sheet metal bracket by itself would have been a complete disaster, but with this welded to our bulkhead and the bulkhead firmly affixed between the two chassis rails of the vehicle, we might have some hope of getting some sort of decent brake feel. There will be more bracing, but first we need to tack this into the car. And there it is in position. Got a bit of angle here to locate it forward and back, keep it square in that direction, and a 1, 2, 3 block clamp to the chassis rail to try and keep it somewhat vertical. That's the easy bit. Now I've got to work out how I'm going to get in there and actually weld it in place. So the next structural member to tack in is this little brace bar, and it's removable because it gets basically sitting on top of the master cylinders, and I just know it's going to get in the way of the brake lines when I'm trying to fit them. And this fits in down here. Now I'll just tack this part into position, and I think I can pull the bulkhead back out of the car. Now I know it's exciting, but try and contain yourself. I think it's time to weld these two parts together. We'll tack them at least. Now all I want to do is attach the pedals, get in the car and make the brum brum noises, but I'm fighting that urge, and I will bend up the little C channel that's going to go on this end of the pedal box. This will be much more light duty because it's not dealing with anywhere near the same sort of forces as the bulkhead area. So it'll help sort of tie the whole lot together, but it'll also create a bit of a rise for a heel rest. So back to the 1mm sheet. Sexy C channel. Going to tack that on there for now so that I can mount it onto the chassis rails. Going to have a captive nut inside the chassis rail on this side and just a little L bracket on this side. Can't do a bolt through the chassis rail on this side because the water tubes run in that chassis rail and I don't want to run into the water tubes. So I've managed to track down some LG2 bronze, which apparently is the go for plain bearings. So before we go any further, let's make some plain bearings. So let me get you caught up. Things got a little bit out of hand once again, but I think most of the hardware has been created. All the pedals now have some nice bronze bushes in them. I've machined up the pivot bar for the brake pedal with some grooves in it for the grub screws. Similar arrangement for the clutch pedal. And the accelerator pedal was going to pivot on this cap head screw, like that. Spring goes on there, and then was going to do it up with a nylock. But the clearance on that bolt was too big, didn't like it. So got some more of that nice chrome bar, welded a nut on the end of it, machined it back, and then drilled a tiny hole for a split pin, and that goes together something. Oh, pedal backwards. Goes together. Spring on there. Washer. Split pin. Very nice. I've decided I don't like where the clutch is. I want it further to the left. This is going to do a few things. It'll put the pedal in a much nicer position. It will allow me to easily install the pivot bar for the brake pedal. I was originally going to have to pass it through the clutch pedal pivot to get it into the brake pedal, which would have been a bit of a pain. And it should also allow a bit more space for the brake balance bar cable adjuster. But that's going to be pretty tight, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So time to break these tacks down and pull the angle grinder out and widen this pedal box. Well, that was a lot of work, but super happy with the result. Everything pivots really nicely on the bronze bushes. It's super stiff, and it managed to actually space the pedals far enough apart so that you can hopefully actuate them independently of each other, which is quite important and was not possible with the vehicle when I first got it. The pedals, I reckon, were in a gap about that big. The last thing to add is the brake balance bar adjuster, and as you can see, if there's no real room to bring the cable out in line with the bar itself, so I got online, and Tilton make a teeny tiny little bevel box for exactly this purpose. It's Tilton branded, so it's 4 times more expensive than it needs to be. I was lucky enough to get this one on eBay for half price, so it made it only 2 times more expensive than it should be, which made it half the cost of the entire pedal box. But it just goes on there like that, and you can now adjust the brakes, the brake bias from the cabin. Very nice. Guess you want to see it in the car, prove it actually fits. Now tell me that doesn't deserve a beer. Of course it does. Cheers!